And here we are on a very special episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal discussion about Star Trek. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Star Trek, the motion picture. And the doctor has to say something.
Oh, here I have the novelization.
Oh, very nice.
Picture right here.
Who wrote it?
This is the only novel written by Gene Roddenberry.
What?
The only Star Trek novel, yes.
Is it good? Have you read it? I've never read it.
Yes, I did. It's trippy.
Who's that in front of you?
This is Spock from the Playmates collection. They came out with several figures from Star Trek 1, but the movie itself, when it came out, actually had its own collection. So this is from the 90s, but this right here is the original Mr. Spock figure that I played with when I was a very, very young lad. So this Mr. Spock has seen many adventures in his day.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm, yeah. They had a small toy line. I think they had Kirk, Bones, Ilea, Decker, and that was it. I think they had a Klingon. But that was it. It was not a very popular toy line.
Did you say that Gene Roddenberry's writing of Star Trek the Motion Picture is trippy? Is that how you described it?
Yeah, he's there's a few there's a number of editor's notes in the novelization that are worth reading, to say the least.
Fascinating.
But we'll get into that as we.
Well, I was just going to say that a word that stands out for me and has stood out for me about Star Trek the Motion Picture over the years is that it is a bit trippy, the movie, especially towards the end. It's a little bit trippy or far out.
Far out, man.
It really is.
I'm looking forward to your summary.
Well,
I'm assuming you're going to do a summary, right?
A little brief little summary of Star Trek the Motion Picture. So we have to consider the context of the Star Trek universe for a second here before I jump right into the plot or the story. But
okay.
The last time we saw the cast and crew of the Enterprise was in, what was it, 65, 67?
I believe so.
And then we saw them in the animated series, and of course, Star Trek Lives. That Star Trek Lives movement went on, and then Paramount or CBS or whoever, the powers that be, were toying around with the idea of another Star Trek called Star Trek Phase 2. And so there was a lot of work put into that, and then that was abandoned. But then they got the green light for Star Trek the Motion Picture. So we start our adventure probably about 20 years after the events of Star Trek the series. I'm going to guess 20 years. Remember, Starfleet Boy, we're a little hazy on our on our facts.
Uh-huh.
That's what we have the doctor here for. And then audience, you're always welcome to correct us. But anyways, the crew have been doing their own thing. Some of them have continued to serve on the Enterprise. Spock has decided to go home to Vulcan to pursue Kolinar, which is the Vulcan discipline of shedding your emotions completely and becoming completely immersed in logic. Captain Kirk has been promoted to Rear Admiral Kirk, and he is actually the head of Starfleet Command. He is Commander Starfleet Command.
Is he?
Yeah, in the beginning of the movie, he
reports to
Admiral Nagura.
Uhura.
Yeah. Any man that could
The line Scotty says it. That's
so they like, any man that could accomplish such a feat, I dare not disappoint.
Very good, very good.
Anyways, Captain Kirk is commander of Starfleet, and the Enterprise has been captained by Decker. Is it William Decker, right?
Will Decker.
Will Decker. And Decker, so he's been the captain, and now the Enterprise is undergoing, or is in the final finishing stages of an important refit, and a threat appears. Out in the neutral zone, the Klingons detect a strange, large energy cloud, and they go to investigate in typical Klingon fashion with guns ablazing, and they're subdued very easily by this cloud, and it's established that it's actually some kind of enemy now. And as the Klingons are facing their final moments, they broadcast an emergency signal out to anyone who can hear them, and Space Station Epsilon 5 picks up the signal, and they observe what's happening, and are immediately horrified when they see the Klingon ship so easily consumed or destroyed by this energy cloud. And one of the officers points out that the cloud is on a precise course toward Earth. So, and also it'll come near the Epsilon space station. Anyways, once this gets back to Starfleet, you can imagine some kind of quick action needed to be taken. So Captain Kirk, of course, feels the need to volunteer himself to go and meet the cloud, the enemy, the danger head on. Hence, he decides, with the approval of Admiral Uhura, to take back command of the Enterprise for this emergency, and he comes aboard, gives Decker the bad news, and they're off to intercept this danger. On the way, they are reunited with Spock. Beautiful scene. Oh, of course, there's already a problem when they first going to warp. Is that Captain Kirk?
This is Captain Kirk.
Very nice.
Here, I'll bring him forward so you can see Captain Kirk in his command uniform there.
Excellent. Well, anyways, Captain Kirk is often criticized by Decker because he doesn't know the new ship design or the new specs, and so they run into this problem where they get into the warp core goes unstable, they get into a wormhole, and now they're delayed. But fortunately, Spock comes aboard, sets things right, and they're back on their merry way. They get to the cloud, and at first they are unsuccessful in contacting it, but just in the nick of time, Spock figures out how to contact them, and all of a sudden the energy blast that was about to consume the Enterprise has dissipated. However, a probe comes aboard, and when it tries to scan the security codes for Starfleet and Earth defenses, Captain Kirk makes a decision to not give it access, and that causes it to get a little upset, and it starts to show force and attack members of the crew, and then it consumes or obliterates, it appears, Lieutenant Ilea. Once the
Let me think about
whoa, Siri thought I wanted to talk to him. That was weird. Anyways, once the probe consumes Ilea, shortly after it sends another Ilea, and then a whole lot of interesting stuff ensues. And then finally, Spock gets a little curious, goes into. We discovered that at the heart of the cloud is a gigantic ship called V-Ger, and so Spock tries to investigate, and he discovers
he goes into the orifice.
Spock enters the orifice, V-Ger's orifice.
I want to make sure.
You have a singular wit, Doctor. I've been dying to say that to you on this show. And now I finally had the chance. Anyway, thank you for allowing me that opportunity. Anyways, he goes in and he figures out that V-Ger is storing information about all the things it's encountered, and literally it has consumed. For example, the Klingon ships are probably stored, the Epsilon station stored, all kinds of things are stored within V-Ger's databank. So it's not actually destroying the ships; it's actually digitizing them and putting.
Yeah, it's the original Google.
It's the original.
Isn't that what Google's doing, digitizing everything?
Yes, perhaps. So,
can we say that on Google Chats?
I guess we can. Yeah. Hey, and by the way, thank you, Google Hangouts, for providing us the opportunity to do the show. If it were not for your technology,
thank you for digitizing us. Yeah.
Thank you for digitizing us. And anyways, V-Ger eventually arrives at Earth and is threatening to destroy Earth because it thinks that carbon-based life forms, humans and the like, are actually infestations, because it thinks of life as itself, which is digital or computer life, machine life. And so Captain Kirk and the crew come up with a clever way of tricking or buying or stalling for time. They go and actually confront V-Ger face to face and discover that what V-Ger actually is Voyager 6, imaginary Voyager 6, but still Voyager 6. And it was apparently somehow went through what we once called black holes, or wormhole perhaps, emerged on the other side, was discovered by a machine race, a race of machine-like beings. Some people think that it might be the Borg. And then it was given the means to fulfill its mission, which is to gather data about everything and transmit it home. And now it's looking for its creator. But of course, the creator is not around. It's 300 years later. So again, the crew they figure out that all they need to do is give Voyager the access transponder code in order to give it the instructions to transmit its data. But V-Ger wants to have direct contact with its creator, and this is when we get a little trippy and far out. Commander Decker, who's been in love with Ilea this whole time, who has a past with her. It's very Riker and Troy that we see echoed later. But Commander Decker decides to go ahead and merge with V-Ger, and in a beautiful sort of light display, he merges with not just V-Ger but the Ilea probe, and they're birthed into a new life form, and voila, the story's over. And so, Doctor, what are you doing over there?
This is Decker. So I was reenacting what you were saying.
Why is his uniform yellow?
That's a good question.
Wait,
because what part of the problem with these toys is that everybody looks the same. So they just made them different colors so you can distinguish. If you look at their faces, Kirk and Decker are almost indistinguishable. So
oh yeah.
So well, I mean
the field uniforms that they're wearing in the end of the movie are kind of like yellowish, beige colored. So
yeah,
you could argue that he's wearing his field uniform. But yeah, problem solved. And then Captain Kirk gets command back of the Enterprise like he always wanted, or Admiral Kirk does. And Decker gets to evolve into the next stage of humanity's, existence, possibly. And the crew of the Enterprise are reunited after their lives took them in different directions. And then we'll have more fun with them for the next 20 years on screen. But this is where it all sort of began. And just a few little kind of details. This film was released in 1979.
Mm-hmm.
It was directed by Robert Wise, the great Robert Wise. Yeah. And it features an amazing score by Jerry Goldsmith.
That's right.
And of course, Gene Roddenberry and all the gang were involved in it heavily because it was a time when he was still alive. So now I guess we should just jump right into our discussion about it. What do you have to say about Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
Well, Star Trek One, I think is one of those. I mean, until I think for a long time it was the worst of the Star Trek movies. I think most fans considered it the worst. I know I had kind of a love-hate relationship with it. I I liked it because it was very different from all the other ones in terms of uniforms and the look of the Enterprise and the look of the shuttlecrafts and all that stuff. So it was kind of like a what if, because when Star Trek Two came around, everything changed, and that was the course for the rest of the movies. So Star Trek One, it represents this interesting little transition period. And when I was growing up, I remember watching the two night. What was it? 2 night? No, it was a 4 hour or 3.5 hour evening event on ABC where they threw in scenes that were never finished. You had white green screen where there were not green screen, but blue screen with nothing on the screen, because they didn't finish the effects and stuff like that. And I honestly, I think it wasn't until the movie was released on DVD as the director's cut, which I happen to have right here, that I really began to appreciate better the film, because for the director's cut, Robert Wise was invited back to finish the film as best they could with improved special effects, and I think it stands as a better film as a result of these changes. But growing up, it was not one of my favorite movies. I think the only thing I really enjoyed about it was the opening with the Klingons, the first 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm. That's an
and
awesome scene, by the way.
and then I would fast forward to the half-hour ride around the Enterprise, where it was literally just half an hour of every single detail of the new ship.
That's an amazing scene.
It's an amazing scene, and I would watch that and just over and over and over again. But other than that, I mostly watched it for comedy.
Well, I think the movie does have some Star Trek, the original series. I think
It's unintentional humor.
no, I don't. Well, I understand what you're saying, yes, but there's
Okay.
also a lot of great intentional humor in
Like-
Star Trek. Just the relationship, the banter between McCoy and Spock. And
In this movie?
yeah, in this movie, there's a great scene where, Spock comes back aboard the ship, and then they're in that like lounge that's just behind the bridge. And by the way, I have to say, unfortunately I have seen the director's cut many times. I bought it also when it was released on DVD. It was very exciting. But unfortunately, the version I have digitally, the one I watched most recently, is the original cut. It's the one available on iTunes, and it's gorgeous. I mean, it's been cleaned up or whatever. It looks wonderful. It's in HD, but it's missing like the cool in that scene that I'm talking about. In the director's cut, they added the nacelle, going off into
the outside.
The outside, going off into the distance, giving you an idea of where they actually are on the ship, which is really cool. And that's not present in the original cut, of course. And there's a lot of other real cool things like that that are not present. But anyways, going back to the humor, what I was talking about, Dr. McCoy kind of says, he says something to Spock, and Spock says, "I see nothing has changed, Doctor. You're still," he basically insults him, and it's kind of funny. You
Does he
know,
say you must learn to govern your passions? Is
that's
that
not
what
in this. That's the next
oh, that's in
movie.
this next one? Okay.
That's when he's talking about
Okay.
Genesis. But it's things
Oh,
like
okay.
that. It's things that like that. I think it's a more sophisticated kind of humor. You have to know these characters. You have to be a fan. You have to have known their inner relationship. But you can see it there, and even just like how Captain Kirk keeps asking Spock to sit down. Would you please sit down?
Yeah, that is funny.
There's
That is
just like
funny.
these little things, or like when Spock first appears and everyone's like really excited to see him, and he's just completely ignores the whole crew. He's just like, and even Kirk says, "Spock, it's good to have you, or welcome aboard," and Spock just kind of pauses and then continues to walk into the turbo lift to go and repair the engines. And then, of course, I didn't realize that Scotty. They started, later. Scotty. I forgot that Scotty was still very svelte in this film, but. But he says some things that I think are, they're meant to be serious. Scotty's stressed out, so he'll say something, but he'll say something that's kind of, funny to the audience, I think. So there are little elements of humor.
Also, I just recalled Sulu's reaction to Ilea is kind of humorous.
Right. Sulu and Chekhov, actually.
Oh, I forgot Checkov. I remember
Yeah.
Sulu's just he's just drooling over her,
Yeah.
and it was very very comical. Um,
Can we talk really quickly? Can we do a real quick discussion about Persis Kambata? I don't know if I'm saying her name right.
oh yeah, um,
I
Lieutenant Ilea.
she's pretty beautiful.
Well, she was she was like Miss Universe.
She was like Miss India Universe, or yeah, something like that. She
No, I think
was.
she was a
Oh,
Miss
Miss
Universe.
Universe, yeah.
Yeah, she had to shave her hair
I know
for
there's
the
some
role.
really adorable photos online of her like cringing as they shave her hair because she's like, "Oh no, what am I doing?" and
I know,
things like
yeah,
that.
but no, she's great.
Sadly, she passed away in 1998. I think it was that I read,
Mhm.
and so she's no longer with us. But she was also on like MacGyver and a bunch of other TV shows. So she made it into kind of TV and cinema in the United States. But here, I think she's both wonderful and alien. She somehow manages to be alien and she's a Deltan, and so she's got this like alien quality, but then also this like beautiful kind of her soul somehow uh, just comes through. Just I think, especially for me, like the scenes at the end when she just keeps looking at Decker. She's acting like a robot, but through her eyes, she's like you could tell that Lieutenant Ilea, the original Lieutenant Ilea, is in there. Is inside the probe. Somehow her consciousness has survived. And Persis Kambata does this completely with her eyes, those gorgeous big eyes, and I thought that was amazing. And actually it was quite moving when I watched it this time. I felt a lot of attachment and emotion that I didn't feel, which, I want to make a comment about something you said. In my personal experience, I didn't like Star Trek, the motion picture, the most of the films either when I was, and it still doesn't rank very high when I did do the rankings. I think we did do the rankings when we talked about Star Trek Beyond, but it always kind of like ranked lower. And I have to admit, rewatching it this time, I don't know what it was, but something was just really exciting about it. And maybe it is because of the new films, but I kind of long for something like the motion picture. I mean, it is a completely original, like science fiction, very, very science fiction kind of story. And just everything from the pacing to like the care with which all the shots are done. I mean, like this is a movie that's how old is it now?
79. I mean,
It's
it's a
30.
little bit younger than I am,
Yes,
so it's
it's
like
like
40
37.
something.
No, it's
Yeah.
37 years. That means because I'm 38 and I was born in 78. So 79, 37 years. So the movie's 37 years old, and I wasn't even watching the director's cut, which has the updated effects and the remastering, and it still for me held up. Like the effects are just really wonderful. And I think who's that, Douglas Trumbull or some Douglas Trumbull or someone like that did the effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So wow, my memory's serving me today. Thank you,
I
memory.
believe so. Yeah. Wait a minute. Was it Douglas Trumbull?
I think so. Now we have to look it up, of course. Anyways, are you looking it up?
Well, I'm looking at the back of the DVD, and I don't see his name listed.
I don't know why that name came to mind, but it seems like that's who it should be.
No, because the whole thing with the whole story with Star Trek 1 is they set a release date before they even had a script.
Oh wow!
Like a workable script. So poor Robert Wise had to work with a movie that was not finished in terms of the script, and they already had a release date set in stone, which today that's actually quite normal, and we continue to have crappy movies because of that. But the special effects were simply not finished, and special effects at that time were not. I mean, today we take it for granted, but back then, special effects on that level were not easy to come by. Remember, this is 79. Star Wars had just come out relatively recently. So a movie with special effects on this level was something that was still quite new. And
really, well, I was gonna say you're absolutely right. But even as an unfinished or rushed film, I think Star Trek: The Motion Picture is so strong, and the effects aren't bad. Now, the only time I think I noticed the effects really were in the ending when they're going to face V-Ger. The Enterprise really does look like a matte painting in that scene when they're actually on the saucer section and they're walking on to V-Ger. But outside of that, I could kind of get lost in the effects pretty easily. Like they held up after all this time. Did you know I still couldn't find who the director of special effects was or why I thought of Douglas Trumbull, but I do remember Isaac Asimov was a science consultant on the film.
yes.
And I thought this movie was actually very sciencey. Like there's a lot of sort of technical space science, hard science fiction going on in this movie. Even the story itself. But I noticed there would be things they would just casually say things like full mag or for magnification, and just there was a lot of technical language in this film, and it wasn't necessarily there's some technical terms that when I saw this movie that I was still oh, I don't even know what that means. I have to look it up, so it's a very good film in that way too. I think that it really does immerse itself in the Star Trek universe.
Well, I'll take the time now to tell my oft-told tale regarding Star Trek 1 and Isaac Asimov. In 1989, I forget how old I was. You can do the math. I was born in 75. I don't know how old I was. But they were doing the, I don't know. Wait, no. It might have been 87 or 89. They were doing the flyby of Uranus. Voyager's flyby of Uranus. And
which some people pronounce
Uranus.
Yes.
Just
since we were talking about orifices. Anyways, go on.
And ouch. And I was staying up to watch this. It was in the summer, and it was on PBS, and it was 2 a.m. And of course, this being the 80s. Actually, even today, you don't get imagery, right away from these space probes. I mean, it takes time for this, the information to travel from the probe to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine back then in the 80s how it was. So you were getting like little pictures coming down, every 10 minutes. You would get a new line of imagery, and they were all very cloudy and black and white, and all these scientists were getting all excited. Well, this was a round table, which included Isaac Asimov, Carl Sagan, the guy who lives in Sri Lanka, or lived in Sri Lanka, Arthur C. Clarke,
Arthur C. Clarke, yep.
the head of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, whoever that was at the time, whomever was probably in charge of that specific Voyager mission, and a couple other NASA guys. So again, let me set the scene. It's 2 a.m. They're waiting for a new set of photographs. They've talked the hell out of the solar system and Voyager. They got nothing else to talk about. So what comes up? Star Trek. And as a kid, I remember like, oh, Star Trek.
You woke up.
I woke up because I was getting kind of like, and they all agree that Star Trek 1 was the best Star Trek.
That's amazing.
It sent me into like convulsions. I wanted to wake up the house.
But I can understand it now.
I mean, I understand it because the reasons they loved Star Trek, they felt that Star Trek 1 was more in keeping with the mission of space exploration, of human exploration of space, which obviously is something NASA is very vested in. As you just mentioned, Isaac Asimov was a science consultant. This is something obviously Arthur C. Clarke was very into. Carl Sagan likewise. So I thought it was very interesting that, and again, this is 87, so we've probably had 3 Star Trek movies, perhaps 4. I don't remember. Depends on the year.
I think Star Trek 3, for sure 3, but I think 4
for sure 3, maybe 4. But I found it just, to this day, I can recall my utter shock at all these people agreeing that Star Trek 1 was the best one. But, you can't understand it. I mean, if you're in that business, Star Trek 1 is probably the only film in the entire Star Trek series where it's all about a first contact. I mean, even Star Trek First Contact is not really about a first contact. It's an action adventure leading up to it.
Right.
But this is actually about the Enterprise encountering a new form of life.
Do you think a movie like Star Trek the Motion Picture, a Star Trek movie like Star Trek the Motion Picture could ever be made again?
I think that in order for a Star Trek movie like that to be made again, it would have to be made under a set of circumstances where perhaps it's almost like an indie movie. Paramount, a major studio, would not take a chance on a movie like that. I mean, it would have to be either Stanley Kubrick coming back from the grave, or my personal
and what he wants to direct is Star Trek, right?
Or my personal favorite, Terrence Malick, saying, "You know what, guys? The next thing I want to do is Star Trek." It would take something like that, but Star Trek. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Finish your thought.
Star Trek is at this point is kind of stuck in a similar rut as Doctor Who is in many ways, which is that its success comes with a price, which is that you can't really take a chance on a film like as esoteric as Star Trek 1. It needs to be something that is that is epic, that's big budget, and all that stuff. So
whatever happened to passion over profit, learning new things, exposing audiences to new ideas and things like that? I say to the studios out there, think about it. Anyways, it's funny you should mention Terrence Malick, because when you look up Douglas Trumbull's 9 visual effects credits,
is Star Trek 1 listed?
He was a special photographic effects director for Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
No
But
way.
obviously, we all know 2001, right?
Right.
He
Silent Running.
did Candy, The Andromeda Strain, Silent Running, The Star Lost, which was a TV series. He did one episode's visual
Oh
effects.
my God, the Star
I don't even know what that is. He did, of course, the Close Encounters of the
of
Third
the Third
Kind.
Kind.
Then Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Blade Runner, which I
He
didn't
was a
realize.
consultant on that. That's true.
Okay. Well, it says special effects, special photographic effects supervisor. So he was a supervisor on
Oh,
that.
I didn't. Okay.
Yeah. And then the Tree of Life is where he was the special effects, visual effects consultant. So that's why those scenes looked so much like Stanley. Like if
It
Stanley Kubrick had
rekindled
come,
that. Yeah,
that it
that's
rekindled that, evoked that sort of thing. It's because Douglas Trumbull was consulting on that. But yeah, so what an impressive little short list of visual effects films, and they all stand out as superb, and I see it now. Like the scene when V-Ger, you know, becomes one with, when V-Ger just like explodes and the Enterprise
Oh, okay.
comes out of this like magical explosion. It's like those effects those are done with like
Models.
models. Well, not just that, like that, even that light thing, it's not necessarily it's not CG the way that we know it today. Some of
Right,
those
they're
effects,
visual effects. They're optical effects, I guess is what we would say now. Optical effects, right.
Yeah. So
Right.
extraordinary work, and still holds up today. In fact, they did, by the way, when we get to this episode, you'll see, but they reused that same explosion thing from V-Ger for Tin Man in Star Trek: The Next Generation.
No.
Unless they remastered it away.
Wow.
I remember like when I saw that, I was like, oh, it's the V-Ger
Wow.
explosion, or the
Wow. I didn't
the
know that.
yeah,
I didn't notice it. Now I know that the opening with the Klingons, that's reused in the Kubarashi Maru sequence in Star Trek 2. They recycle that Klingon footage.
Oh yeah, a little bit. Actually, also the we got to talk about this for a second.
There's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about, but we have to talk about this specifically because it just reminded me. Well, in Star Trek 2, they use a shorter version of the Enterprise leaving dry dock scene, which is also a recut, I think, if I'm not mistaken, of this original scene. A lot of work was put into this, and it freaking shows, because to this day, it feels like you're touring the Enterprise. Like it feels like you're actually and it never gets old for me. I never get tired of it. Everything from sweeping from behind it, seeing it through the dry dock, and then that wonderful sequence where the Enterprise, I mean the pod turns, and then you see the glorious front shot, the full frontal shot of the USS Enterprise
with the music. Talk about the music.
Yeah, da 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 da. Which, by the way, a lot of people, I think that I know, had forgotten, including myself, when Star Trek: The Next Generation came out, that theme was actually in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I don't know how I forgot about it, because I'm really good with that kind of stuff usually. but I was like, oh yeah, that's why that's familiar. But beautiful, beautiful score. Almost the entire movie has music playing behind it, and it's so perfect. Like it doesn't ever seem like he's just looping things, like just incidental. It just always seems very intentional and beautiful. It's one of the most gorgeous scores to listen to. I would have loved to have been an audience member in 1979, and you walk in, you take your seat, the lights go dark, and what you hear is Ilea's theme playing.
As the, what do you call that?
It's the preamble, the prologue,
I forgot that has a term. I can't remember what it is now.
Overture.
Overture. There.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Thank you.
overture.
The overture.
Beautiful overture. Yeah,
um,
which is on the DVD.
it's on the
Is it on
DVD.
the
It's on the digital copy as well.
the full overture? That's great.
Yeah.
Because I know
Dun,
on TV they wouldn't do it. On
dun,
TV it would
dun,
go right
dun.
away to the movie, which of course, the credits has its own wonderful theme,
Mhm.
but the overture right before it is beautiful.
And that it's credited as being Ilea's theme, and it's the love theme between Ilea and Decker, and it's just so perfect. There's also a lot of Alexander Courage's theme interspersed at various moments, and you hear that, but it's just done so like it's treated so wonderfully with this orchestral version of it, where it's like da na 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 na, like all these things. I can't
It's
ever
epic.
do it. It is. It's epic. That's the
Epic.
best way to describe it. It's super epic. I'm gonna add super to that.
You know
Epicness.
what helped all that, I think, is I mean, of course, Star Trek always had its theme, but I think what truly contributed to this amazing score is the fact that Star Wars utilized classical, a classical theme. It wasn't electronicized. The theme for Star Wars was a traditional score, and it wasn't electronic like Forbidden Planet or anything like that. So when we get to, so of course, Star Trek One is an attempt to, quite frankly, cash in on the Star Wars craze. They wanted to mimic as much as they can, and of course, it was a great excuse to have a very lush, beautiful score as it did.
And it sets the pace for a lot of science fiction movies after that. But also, but there is some interesting innovation in the score too, because in a lot of the scenes with V-Ger, you'll have this like very harsh kind of like, and what that is, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember my facts correctly, is an electric guitar.
Yes, you're right.
I vaguely remember that was like one of the few films of the time that was a classical score or a concert score, concert music score that had an electric guitar in it. So
Yeah.
down, dun-dun-dun,
We didn't hear an electric guitar in Star
dun-dun-dun.
Wars until episode 2.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that Zam Wessel's chase scene. But
No.
yeah, that's the scene.
I'm thinking about when Obi-Wan is escaping Django, and remember when the bomb hits the asteroids, the score goes quiet, and then all of a sudden,
Oh yeah, that's a special effect sound. I'm talking about in the score though.
oh, it's not a guitar that they're using in
They
that?
might be using a guitar.
I thought it was
But
guitar.
but what I'm saying is the score itself has an electrical
yes,
guitar.
in the image.
The V-Ger theme is an electrical guitar, I think, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken. I have to relook this up, but I remember being
I
impressed.
think you're right.
And they do, and you're right about an electric guitar being in the score for Star Wars Episode 2, but it's not. It's during the Zam Wessel chase scene through Coruscant. Yeah,
Right.
it's like where it's like but it's like a little different. It's a little higher. It's more. It sounds more like an electrical guitar in Star Wars than it does here in Star Trek. But there's just like the whole beginning of this film does an amazing job of just like impressing you. And I can only imagine what it was like for audiences to go in and see this movie, especially if they were among the fans that had missed Star Trek for so long, because it was off the air, and to just see this film and the scope and the scale. I don't know. There's like a majesty to it that we just don't see ever again in Star Trek. It's the only time I think in Star Trek that there's this kind of majesticness that's like so long, like so much. It's so much a part of the entire film. You'll have majestic moments, but this is like pretty much the entire. I don't know if you agree with me, but the entire film for me felt very majestic and like that scene with the Enterprise, and even the scene of the Enterprise flying over V-Ger, and like there's just a lot of that in like scale and scope and stuff like that. What do you think?
Have you ever spoken to fans who saw the film when it originally came out?
I spoke to some of my friends had gone to see the film, and I remember them just, like kind of, this is now like in the 90s, late 90s, 2000s. And so it's like, I think they hadn't even seen it since they saw it in the movie theater. The
But
people
what was their reaction at the time?
Well, my friend Shar and Ken said that they remembered seeing the film when it came out in theaters, and I remember them feeling. I don't remember the conversation in detail, but I remember the vibe was that, like, yeah, it was an exciting thing to go see and witness.
That's completely opposite to what people have told me.
No, I don't.
I just had a conversation last week at Target with somebody. I ran into a teacher who's a huge Star Trek fan, and actually we were complaining about the Star Trek movie to come out soon, Star Trek Beyond, and we were complaining about that, and she brought up Star Trek: The Motion Picture and how boring it was.
Oh man!
And how she made this enormous. She remembers, making this enormous line, and she was all excited. And then she came out, and it was just like, oh my God, all these years, and it was so boring. And that echoes. My dad doesn't like it. I know several people who, from other jobs, who somehow I always manage to find the Trekkies at work, and they all have similar reactions. I've never found anybody older than myself who has any love for Star Trek the motion picture. If I find anybody who has any appreciation for it, they usually had it. They're usually my age, and of course I was not old enough. I mean, I didn't see it in the theater. My first Star Trek movie is actually part 3, I think.
I think mine was Star Trek 4.
Okay. So, my discovery of the movie is on VHS. No, I'm sorry, on television and on VHS. And again, I think it's just, for us, it's after the fact. So for us, it's always seeing the movie in the context of, well, we know what the current continuity is with, at that point, part 2, part 3, part 4, the red uniforms, this is what's going on. And then the old series. And here is this one weird adventure where they have, completely different uniforms. The character interactions are slightly different. Some would say off. Actually, if you'll let me cover that part right now, I think the character interactions in the movie are a little off. Certainly, Kirk has a strange intensity about him. Again, you saw the movie recently. I haven't, but I seem to recall he says lines like, "I need you," a lot in the movie. He needs Bones. He needs Spock. He says it with a little more intensity than he usually does. There's a line that McCoy has. They've just had a conversation with Spock, and Spock leaves, and McCoy and Kirk are together. And McCoy says something like, "How can we be sure about him? How can we be sure about any of us?" And like, there's all this like weird.
I think the scene you're referring to is like McCoy kind of questions Spock's, intentions. And
right, but then he's like, "How can we be sure about any of us?" And there's I
don't know if there's something different
about.
Maybe it's different in the director's cut, but in the cut I just saw last night, what he actually says is, "I could never think that of him," is what Kirk says about Spock. He's like, I could never. No,
but McCoy says.
Oh yeah. That's
Doesn't he say like that?
No, I don't remember.
You don't remember? I remember.
I have a terrible memory. I think, for me, it's like, it's funny because there's a transition from, television characters to cinema characters. And I think that this movie definitely has I would echo your sentiment, but how I see it is that, like, I think that all these actors had to rediscover these characters, and they're experimenting and trying to play them differently. I mean, another example of, a character that's totally different now is Dr. McCoy left Starfleet. So did Spock. Like, it seems like
Right.
at the beginning of this movie, like, some of the characters were just, they're done, for whatever reason. And, and so McCoy had left Starfleet, and I love that, when he beams aboard, he's got like a beard, and it looks like he just came from a disco or
Yeah,
something.
he's really rocking that beard,
like,
isn't he? With that medallion.
yeah, with
That's
the
great.
medallion.
I wish he'd done the rest of the movie like that. That would have been awesome.
And he's like, I love when he complains. He's like, I heard Chapel's
an MD now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna need a nurse.
Which, by the way, I have to give a nod to Karl Urban. He is one of the few. I feel like he really nails the McCoy thing.
Oh yeah, he channels him perfectly.
Yeah, he nails him. It's believable that Karl Urban is still a different McCoy, but there's so much of the classic McCoy in there. The real McCoy, of course, is always going to be DeForest Kelley. Did you notice? And now, so I have a question for you, because
Sure.
I sometimes I go a little too far in reading into things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've recently had a teeny tiny glimmer of optimism about Star Trek Beyond, and I don't know if you feel the same way or if you just feel like this is an insult, but the poster for Star Trek Beyond echoes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love it.
Oh, good. Okay.
It
echoes the poster for Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah, it has the colors, doesn't it? And it has the faces
and the Enterprise. So yeah, and it's also Spock on the same side in blue and Kirk in red, and then instead of Ilea, it's the new character whose name I can't remember right now. I'm sorry.
I believe it's Bob Peck who did the illustration, if I'm not mistaken. The great Bob Peck.
Very cool.
But yeah, I love the illustration, and here's the slightly altered on the director's cut. But I actually thought that's one of the most successful aspects rather of the motion picture is the poster. Another successful element. I think I'll break it down to what I think worked and what didn't work. Definitely the poster works, the music works. Let's talk about the sets.
Yes.
I love those sets, man.
Same here. No argument.
I love oh man, the rec room, which is where they gather the whole crew and they show them the movie of the Epsilon station being absorbed
or digitized. We'll call it
digitized as by Google.
Star Trek: The Motion Picture was actually predicting the future. V-Ger is a metaphor for the digital revolution, which was on its way. No more physical media. It's all going to be digital.
Oh, man. Don't get me started on that. I own physical media right here.
Well,
V-Ger can pry it from my cold dead hand.
Wow.
The Enterprise, the changes, the alterations they made for the film, both exterior and interior, I think we're pretty cool. I think we're pretty good. Although the bridge, I have to admit, obviously with subsequent entries in the series, we've seen much, more interesting bridges. There is a sense of scale to that bridge, which is pretty cool. Now the film, unfortunately, there's some very odd, almost fisheye. Like there's parts of the ship that look of the bridge that look out of focus when they're focusing on on certain characters on the bridge. I don't know why that is.
Well, that's an optical effect. I didn't mind. Actually, photographically, I think it's beautiful. When That's an optical effect of using a wide-angle lens
Right.
or a shallow depth of field. I mean, the bridge is a very dark set too, so I imagine that they had to open the aperture up to get the correct exposure. But
Right, but by virtue, you don't see as much of detail of the
right,
bridge as you do
I
in other films. So
I think that's intentional, and I think it's beautiful. But anyways, sorry.
no, yeah, no, but I mean, it kind of, it's, bridge gazing is something that I like to do in Star Trek movies, and that movie kind of frustrates me because I'm trying to look at the bridge.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is out of focus.
It's a very simple bridge. It's a lot like it's a lot simpler than even the original series bridge. And I think as far as bridges go, you know which is my favorite, of course.
Oh yeah, I know.
But I think this was a cool bridge for its time. It gets better though. I think this bridge is my least favorite bridge of the original series bridges. I think that Star Trek 2's is even better. They up the ante in Star Trek 2, and Star Trek 4's bridge is a brief moment that it's on. Is on. It's a pretty epic looking bridge, and then you see it a little more refined in Star Trek 5. But then Star Trek 6 is the ultimate bridge. The undiscovered country bridge.
Can't beat that. Other aspects of the set designs I would like to point out are again, I'm trying to recall. Well, I guess this is beyond set design, but the look of the shuttlecraft that approached, that brought Spock aboard the Enterprise.
Oh, the long range, yeah,
the long range shuttle. But not only that, but that shuttlecraft was completely flat. It did not have any landing legs, which I always thought was a very interesting look. It was it was longer than the typical shuttlecraft that we've been used to from the original series.
I believe in the film, what it's referred to is a ship-to-ship, long-range ship-to-ship transport. So it's never intended to land, and that's why it has warp capability. It has a warp nacelle attached to it, which is not something most shuttlecrafts until Next Generation have.
Right. I think. Do we see that it docks instead of actually going into the deck, into the landing deck? Is that correct?
It docks behind the bridge. There's a port, and on the bridge section, I should say, not the bridge itself, but the bridge deck is that huge hump on top of the saucer section, and I think it's actually like 2 or 3 decks within that itself. It's a really cool thing. We don't see anything like that, although the space station in Star Trek 2 is pretty cool, and they reuse that in the Next Generation also, by the way.
They do?
Yeah, the
Epsilon station. Wait, you talking about
Regula in Star Trek 2.
Regula. Oh, yeah. Okay.
The Epsilon station is so interesting and unique. We don't ever see anything like that again, but it's so easy to imagine when you see the Epsilon station and you see, for example, the International Space Station today. It's so easy to imagine like a space station that humans build looking like the Epsilon space station. It's not far-fetched. It is very far-fetched, but it's also something one can imagine. Whereas like space stations like the one in Star Trek 3, that's like that's really something that seems a little more far out and more in the distant future. But you could see us building something like Epsilon in 100 years, I think, or less.
You were just referring to the shuttlecrafts as not intended to land. I am actually referring now to this is a book I haven't referred to. Oh, do we have?
I think
this is V-Ger.
Oh my gosh! It's
V-Ger.
V-Ger.
Oh my goodness!
V-Ger
just found us.
I can't believe this. It's V-Ger's here. Wow! I thought
V-Ger is here. How's it going, guys?
Boy,
Good.
this movie's pretty boring, huh?
Oh,
Oh my god. I tried to just watch it now. I didn't even get through like the first 25 minutes. It is awful. I take back everything I said to you on the phone earlier.
no.
I told him, Doctor, I told him I gave this movie a 9 in my memory,
What?
and it's more like -9.
Oh no, come on. You're just in a bad mood or something.
I just got to the part where McCoy showed up with his beard, with his homeless man beard.
You're not far behind our discussion then because we just finished talking about that.
So I apologize for interrupting. Go on.
No, Goldie Scott, welcome to the show. And you
Thank
seem
you.
it seems as though you're disembodied. Are we talking to you on a different method or something like that?
Well, he's
Yes.
speaking from inside of V-Ger, isn't he?
I am using the Hangout app for the first time ever from my iPhone.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so you never made it to V-Ger's orifice.
No, I did not.
Oh.
I did
Oh,
not
that's
make
too
it
bad.
into the
See,
orifice.
The Doctor and I have already been through the orifice, and we've merged with V-Ger.
We've
and
touched it.
We've touched.
And moved beyond it.
We've touched V-Ger, and we've evolved now into the next stage of existence.
We're now looking for Lieutenant Ilea.
Lieutenant Ilea.
Did she come aboard already?
Yeah, I met
Oh, that's
her.
right. Okay, you met Lieutenant.
Everybody's aboard but Spock.
But Spock. Well, that's who we
Hippie
were just
Spock.
talking about. So,
Hippie Spock and homeless McCoy. Go on.
so Doctor, you were just saying that.
Oh yeah, I was about to.
He was the Doctor. We were having a very nerdy discussion about the long-range ship-to-ship transport.
Oh yeah, seems very dangerous.
Are you able to see us, Golden Scott? Are you?
If I take my phone out of my pocket, I believe I can. Yes.
Oh,
Really?
I can
Oh,
see you.
okay.
We're in.
Well, I'm about to show off one of my most prized possessions. Now, this is something that Sohail here will recall from our high school discussions of Star Trek. I have with me, ladies and gentlemen, Scotty's Guide to the Enterprise.
I also own that book. By the
That's
way.
awesome. Mr. Scott.
Mr.
I like that.
Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise, in which they have detailed drawings of the shuttlecraft that we're speaking of right now.
Oh.
And apparently it is intended to land.
Behave!
So,
I stand corrected.
by none other than Mr. Scott. And as a matter of fact, within Star Trek: The Motion Picture, they actually have a small photograph of the hangar, and there is a shuttlecraft that is landed. I don't know if you can see it, but
I see it there.
see right there.
I have a question for you, but both of you.
Okay.
So you see how enormous the shuttle bay is in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, right?
Yeah.
We don't
know where
see
this is going.
the shuttle bay again until Star Trek V, and all of a sudden it's the size of my apartment.
What's the thing in Star Trek 2 where they're sending out Spock's corpse? Oh, spoiler alert for Star Trek.
No, it's all right.
It's all right.
You have to be a fan of this show and have already seen these to enjoy these discussions anyway, so it's all right.
Yeah.
They send him out in a photon torpedo, and so they launch him from the photon torpedo tube.
Oh, okay. So that's the torpedo bay, not the shuttle bay.
Right, correct. The shuttle bay is supposed to be it's the scale is correct in this movie. It's suddenly no longer correct in Star Trek V. It's like literally like this tiny thing, and like.
Let me just point out that's a different Enterprise. In Star Trek V.
Okay, but they don't
Yes,
change.
he's right.
They don't change in proportion. It's just I mean.
Yes,
Well, what
but
happened
remember
in
they
Star
have to
Trek
give
V?
over size to for the whale navigators.
Oh,
They
you
have to
stole
give
my
over.
joke! I was going to say that.
So you're telling me that they decided, well, okay, we're not going to transporter technology's gotten so good, we're not going to use shuttles much, so let's reduce the size of the shuttle bay and put in a tank for the whale navigators. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
You know what? I can buy that. I can go along with that.
I
Thank
can't
you.
because I don't believe the whale navigators really exist.
Oh my.
Can we talk about the uniforms?
Yes,
Sulu
we
is in
definitely
this.
can talk about the uniforms. I actually like those uniforms a lot. What do
Golden
you-
Scott?
I thought it was a little bit weird how there were strange variations. Like, for example, Sulu. Sulu's uniform was inexplicably different from everyone else's.
Well, no,
And,
there's like this thing going on. I don't know if you noticed this, but some people are wearing a uniform with like this really enormous sort of V-neck opening that shows off your chest.
that's what Sulu was wearing. I didn't
Right.
see anyone else wearing that.
It was like totally an option because there's a lot. No, the people, all the people on Epsilon, Space Station Epsilon, are wearing that same tunic style, medieval tunic.
Yeah.
And there were other people. I did notice that. And it's very dated. It's very 70s. And so is Dr. McCoy's outfit when he beams aboard the
Yes.
Enterprise. We were just saying
I would
that.
say I like
We were
some
just
of
saying
them,
that
and I
he
don't
came
like
from a disco.
Yeah, he
He's
definitely
really
did
rocking
with
it,
his-
though, man.
with his
I
giant
think he should have
necklace.
stayed that way the whole movie.
Humbert really liked the look.
The necklace.
the medallion.
Oh, yeah, man. I think they used that on Battlestar Galactica, that same medallion. I think Adama wore that medallion, and that's how they found the...
I think that medallion has been passed on through the ages to many famous people, including, but not limited to, Ozzy Osbourne, Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger has definitely worn McCoy's outfit.
Outfit.
Wasn't
some tour.
And
wasn't that
medallion.
medallion the thing that went on top of the staff in Raiders of the Lost Ark?
That's correct. It is the same medallion. You are correct, sir.
There's this like very exclusive cabal of people that have been wearing the McCoy medallion.
The medallion cabal.
The medallion cabal. It gives them special powers. It makes them just like a rock star. Is basically what it does. We were talking about the sets earlier, and that's what led to the discussion about
the sets.
And I want to talk about the V-Ger, the actual set where we finally meet V-Ger. I thought that was pretty freaking cool and huge. It looks like a huge set with lots of like screens that are pulsating different colors, and it's just really believable as like this hub that like basically is at the center of the ship, and there's this little tiny, old computer in the form of Voyager 6 kind of at the heart of it, and I loved it. I thought that was one of the coolest set pieces. I loved the entire V-Ger spaceship set, and it's funny. I think finally in the director's cut, we do see it realized the way the director and the production team may have wanted it to be seen, but it's not bad in the original cut either. It's pretty epic in terms of scale and size and so on. And so I thought, like, again, this movie was, again, in that way that I was talking about earlier, very majestic and on a huge scale that I don't think we've seen again in Star Trek, frankly. We haven't seen this scale in Star Trek since.
In running time as well.
In running time as well. I will echo the comment about the epic nature of the film, but you have to admit, a lot of the movie is just the Enterprise crew staring at the view screen, and nothing else. Not a lot happens.
I don't even know that it's epic. Do you think it's epic?
In scale.
It's got an epic score.
In scale.
It's got epic music. But if the story itself is there's a giant cloud coming to Earth,
which is epic.
The Enterprise
cloud
goes
itself
out
is quite
and
epic.
investigates the cloud, and that's it.
Well,
that's all that happens.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's epic in scale. The scale of the film, in terms of the special effects that were at least attempted, its score, Even in cinematography, this was 70 millimeter, correct, Sohel?
That's correct.
This was actually the only 70 millimeter Star Trek.
Is it? I didn't realize that. I think
I don't think Star Trek 2 is.
No, but I do think that they go back to 70 millimeters for Generations, and I think the subsequent.
Really?
Yeah, I do believe the subsequent Next Generation films are 70 millimeters.
Nah,
As well.
I don't know about that, man.
We'll have to look at-
70
we'll have to look
millimeter
at-
is a pretty old school thing that, like.
No, it made a resurgence recently. I mean, there are.
But it was a big deal. It made a resurgence from like 40 or 50 years of not being used, not like 15 or 20.
Well, having said that, Star Trek is definitely 70 millimeters. So we're talking about it's epic in scale, but in terms of story, I think we can all agree that the story is basically a mash of the episode known as The Changeling, where you have a probe that comes back. This is from the original series. It's the same. Yes, it's a mesh of that one, and I forget what the other one is, but it's basically two old Star Trek episodes meshed together. They tack on, sort of a let's round up the old crew at the beginning, but the story itself is pretty basic, and a lot of the movie is the crew just staring at the view screen. And yeah, it is FX porn on some level. I mean, on the 70s level, just watching these special effects on the view screen. But not a lot happens. I mean,
I do think that the special effects were meant to appeal to kind of the
2001
crowd, but also there's like a degree of like, where we were talking about this earlier, the trippiness of it. I think that people were really into visualizations that were trippy like that, and it's possible that audiences were on drugs like LSD when they were
like the people that dressed like McCoy. That's who the drug audience was.
Speaking of trippy, I think now would be a good time to read from the Star Trek 1 novelization, which was written by Gene Roddenberry. And he made
for this show.
I've been waiting a very long time to speak my mind about Star Trek 1.
Nobody's been willing to listen until now?
No one has been willing to indulge.
It's possible no one will listen to this episode still, but at least it's documented for future generations.
There's a couple of additions that Gene Roddenberry added to the novelization that are different from the film, and I'll start off with stating that do we all recall the scene where with the transporter accident at the very beginning of the film?
Yes, we do. Very cool scene.
That was scary.
Scene. Yeah, very scary. It really did finally kind of make me realize that, oh, that shit's scary.
That Bones is right.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What we got back, Enterprise, thankfully, didn't live long. I think that's the okay. Well, there were two people in that accident. It was the other Vulcan. I forget what his name is, Surak or Sovak or.
Oh yeah, it was gonna be. I think it was damn it, can't remember. But yeah.
He was just like a poor man's Spock.
The poor man's Spock.
He even looked like Spock. He was like what Harvey Keitel is to Robert De Niro.
Oh man.
Right?
Oh boy.
Poor Harvey Keitel.
You know what I mean.
Oh my gosh. And well, there was another person there, Lieutenant Chiani or something like that. Well, that, according to the novelization, was Kirk's wife.
What?
Thank
What?
you. Yes.
What?
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Kirk's wife.
What?
What?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Read it.
So
Read
in this
it.
scene, does Kirk have like a crazy breakdown that his wife just died in front of him?
No, he's very dispassionate about it. I don't think that translate. I think this novelization was written after the film, Goldie Scott.
No.
What?
It wasn't?
No. What are you
No.
talking about?
He just said this is the original version, right? This is what
I
it
thought
The
this
original-
was
yeah.
no.
This
I
came first.
Oh, sorry. I misunderstood you saying this is the novelization of the film, which
Yes.
means it was written. Right. No. Usually that
They're
means it's-
written. No, they're written at the time of filming.
Oh well, I'm glad that didn't make it to the movie.
Now, did they excise that out of the shooting script? Perhaps. But that character is meant to be Kirk's wife. They were married for a year.
That's super weird.
Yep. Now, I'm going to read to you a very odd editor's note that's in the novelization. I'm not entirely sure who the editor is supposed to be in the context of the novelization, but I'm just going to read it to you. The human concept of friend is more nearly duplicated in Vulcan thought by the term Thala, which also means brother and lover. Spock's recollection, from which this chapter has drawn, is that it was a most difficult moment for him, since he did indeed consider Kirk to have become his brother. However, Thala can be used to mean lover, and since Kirk's and Spock's friendship was unusually close, this has led to some speculation over whether they had actually indeed become lovers. This is Gene Roddenberry, ladies and gentlemen.
That's where it all
Writing
comes
this.
from. That's where it all comes from.
Whoa.
I didn't realize that. Because there's a lot of Kirk Spock romance
I'm not
stuff.
done yet. Hold
Oh.
on.
Oh my.
This is a juicy episode.
Oh my.
Oh my.
The editor's note continues. At our request, Admiral Kirk. So this is direct from Admiral Kirk, folks. Admiral Kirk has supplied the following comment on this subject. So this is Admiral Kirk's, apparently slash fiction has reached the ears of Admiral Kirk. and the editor of like I said, the context of this editor's note is really quite bizarre. So this is Admiral Kirk speaking.
Gene was doing a little too much LSD. It looks like in the
A little too much LDS.
LDS, exactly. Anyways, go on.
So I'm going to try to read it in the voice of Admiral Kirk. I was never aware of this lover's rumor, although I have been told that Spock encountered it several times. Apparently, he had always dismissed it with his characteristic lifting of his right eyebrow, which usually connoted some combination of surprise, disbelief, and/or annoyance. As for myself, although I have no moral or other objections to physical love in any of its many earthly, alien, and mixed forms,
Yes. 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 This
sorry,
is very true. Captain Kirk would have definitely made out with the Forda if it wouldn't have melted his face.
I have always found my best gratification in that creature, woman.
Oh.
Also, I would dislike being thought of as so foolish that I would select a love partner who came into sexual heat once only every 7 years.
Wow. This is
Ladies and
epic
gentlemen.
stuff.
That was Gene Roddenberry from Star Trek.
I have to say that's pretty epic stuff. That's pretty cool.
This is why I keep these things. This is my argument for physical media, folks. None of this digital crap that you people read or watch has this.
Yeah, you're right.
You people.
I know. He just said you people.
You
I don't know
people.
what that means.
Stop watching this. The people watching this, they're watching digital crap.
But, there's a lot of arguments about this because digital media, as we know, can be revised.
Mm-hmm. So is that not available now in digital form?
I don't
What?
know. I'd have to check the Kindle. Let's check it out, guys. Let's see what the
Check the Crindle.
Kindle or the iTunes. So
the
Kindle.
I would
grinder.
think it is. I think most of the Star Trek stuff is available on e-format.
Is it on Tinder?
Well, perhaps that part was.
Guys, you can buy this novel on a Kindle for $1.99. I am buying it right now.
I gotta finish my Section 31 book first.
The paperback is $24.99. And then there's a loose leaf from $4.80. I don't know what that is. Like maybe it's fallen apart.
A loose leaf binder.
Yeah, loose leaf means that
Somebody
you
wrote it in pencil.
It's like an ancient manuscript or something.
Something on papyrus. It was written on papyrus.
So,
Papyrus.
which are your favorite? I asked this to the both of you. Which characters do you think stand out in Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
Decker.
Decker and Ilea, yeah. And it's interesting
Not
that...
Ilea. Just
The
Decker.
child molester?
What?
The actor who was on
Seventh Heaven, you're right. Oh,
yes.
no.
That is the child molester, ladies and
I take
gentlemen.
back my answer. I take it back. Take it back. Didn't like it.
Oh, but is that... Oh, that's... Oh, I'm so...
Does that knowledge make this movie
No, it
uncomfortable
doesn't.
now?
No, it doesn't make it
Yes.
uncomfortable. It makes it sad.
Yes.
It makes it sad.
Yes.
It makes it sad.
Yes.
It's so sad. That's terrible. That's who that actor is. People...
Ah, I could totally see it now. He's got those eyes.
Whoa, are there... Golden Scott, are
Whoa,
there...
wait a minute now.
Do people
Right?
have child molester eyes?
It just makes, I don't know, something about him. Now that you say that, something clicked.
Oh no, I don't know. Let's not descend into darkness here. I will. I'll say that obviously when you learn something about an actor like this, for example, Bill Cosby's another example of someone who's
Oh my
done
God,
some
yes.
very,
Horrible.
There were even some crazy theories out there about William Shatner at some point.
Well, yeah, some people think William Shatner has murdered his wife.
I wasn't going to actually say it, but
but some people do think that.
Hey, this is Starfleet boy. We go all the way here.
Yeah, I don't think it's something we should shy away from discussion about. No, the film is still intact as a film and a story. I feel like I can say, what can you do? What do you do? Do you digitally remove? Let's just never mention this actor's name so no one can ever find him.
Oh my God! Could you imagine the Cosby Show if they digitally just removed Bill Cosby and it was just episode after episode of people talking to themselves?
Oh my gosh, this is so depressing though to find out that.
But would they do that with like Fat Albert and the Jell-O commercials and
All
I
of it,
Spy?
everything.
Everything.
Erase him from
I mean,
all media from all time.
What do you do, right? What if the worst person in the world made an amazing, was part of an amazing movie? The
Hey,
nice
you're the Ender's Game fan.
I am a fan of Ender's Game, and unfortunately, Orson Scott Card is publicly known to not.
You loony.
Yeah,
Can we just call him Orson Card, please?
is there why? Oh, you don't like the Scott part? That's
Yeah,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Card.
Mr. Card.
So aside from
Thanks
from
for
Decker.
that downer. But it's a good thing you brought it up.
I'm not the one that cast a child molester in this movie.
No one knew. How could they have known back then? I don't know if they knew.
The eyes? They could have known by the eyes. Just look at his eyes.
Oh my god, that's terrible. You can't discriminate by people's eyes. It's like this is like the worst thing.
Aside from Will Decker, who else stood out in terms of? We don't have many characters in this movie, really.
Well, for me, honestly,
No.
like the most outside of Decker being a cool character, the the most exciting thing is Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. You know, like the old triage there, triage, medical. The old trio there. I think they really make the film, and just like I like the way that the film kind of put them back together too. It starts off with just Kirk, and like things aren't going well for him. He seems really lost. He's not respected by Decker. It seems like a weird thing that he's wanting to take command of the Enterprise, you know, and then when Spock arrives, all of a sudden the tone changes and Kirk's confidence immediately. Well, first, sorry, before that, even McCoy arriving, you can see Kirk's confidence go up. But then when Spock arrives, you then see like that Kirk seems like a complete person almost, with his two best friends, his two closest advisors at his side once more, and you see the dynamic immediately. You know, McCoy has one view and Spock has the other view, and Kirk is kind of like the balance in the middle there. You know, it's like that one scene, for example, where Spock kind of makes the assessment and he says V-Ger's a child treated as such, and you see Kirk then interpret that, and then he acts out his thing, but he couldn't have come up with that without both Spock and McCoy at his side. And I think this is something that's echoed throughout the films. And to Star Trek V's credit, I love this is a film where you see that again, and it's beautifully illustrated in that movie as well. And I think Kirk needs Spock and McCoy to be the best he can be. I also like that Kirk is not afraid to be corrected. I like when he's on the bridge and he's about to like question Decker, and Decker explains himself, and then he says, "I stand corrected." And again, it happens before that, where in the wormhole, the wormhole scene, Kirk orders phasers to destroy the asteroid that's caught in there with them, and Decker belays the order, and then the beautiful photon torpedoes that I love launch out. By the way, it was blue in this movie. It's red later on. Anyways, he questions.
What's red?
The photon torpedo effect is the light emanating from it is blue in this movie, and in Star Trek 2 through whatever, it's red.
Interesting.
But
what do you make of that?
It's probably just a different kind of phosphorus chemical that helps to propel the photon torpedo, and that one just happens to create a blue light while the other ones create a red light. Or they're using synthetic kyber crystals instead of natural kyber crystals. I don't know, but
kyber crystals are Star Wars. Wrong thing there.
I don't know. Anyways,
yeah, kyber crystals are what they make lightsabers from.
I know.
Right?
I said that intentionally, Calder Scott.
Oh, you were making a joke.
I was making a joke.
I'm sorry.
He was testing you.
I was testing.
I didn't know we were joking. I thought we were keeping in the tone of this movie with no jokes.
I was just arguing.
No, you missed the humor part. There's a lot of humor in this movie.
There is.
Oh, come on. Speaking of humor.
I mean, besides McCoy's beard.
No, but speaking of humor, let's discuss the overabundant use of the word orifice in this movie. What the hell, man?
Well, V-Ger seems to be comprised of many levels of many different orifici.
Couldn't they use the word doorway like a normal person, or passage?
But it doesn't look like a doorway. It doesn't look like a doorway. It kind of like does this like opening thing, like an aperture. Oh, they could have said the aperture.
They could have used aperture. Yes. They could have. Yes.
They could have said aperture. And I don't understand. Did they enter V-Ger from the rear, or did they enter V-Ger from the front?
From the front.
Oh, okay.
As you know, not all alien
species
species have their orifices in the same place.
This is true.
As David Bowie's wife is fond of telling us.
That's actually true. David Bowie's wife did tell us that information. That's amazing.
So now, did any of you think that Kirk's reactions to people were a little just over the top? I mean, there's a lot of intense, like, I need you, and there's a lot of touching, especially when Spock is in sick bay, and doesn't he grab Kirk's hand, and there's like a lot of Ponfar going on there. I mean, what
I can. So getting
what's going on there? Tell me.
So getting older, I can kind of understand this better. I did feel
Really?
when I was younger and I watched this film, I did feel like it was like, those cues were a bit bizarre, perhaps, and a bit uncomfortable, maybe, because when you're young, it's like everything's kind of like a little sexualized in your mind. But I think as I'm getting older, I've learned the difference between a kind of affection. You can show affection and be physical with friends in a way that's not.
I don't know. I'm having the reverse experience.
Really? No,
Oh my God! The older I get, the more I think about sex all the time.
No, it's different for me. I feel like I feel, especially now, since my current mission takes me so far away from my previous posting where I have a lot of friends. When I come back and visit y'all, I feel like touching you. I feel like hugging and touching, and like there's a lot of feels that happen. And so I think that it's natural. And in this film, you see it. You actually see this echoed throughout Star Trek because, what does Kirk do in Star Trek V after Spock? We shouldn't be talking about Star Trek V yet, but, after Spock saves him and
Spoilers, everyone, spoiler alert.
No one cares. This is not Drunk Space Nine. We don't do spoiler announcements.
Being careful.
There's no spoiler announcements here. This is a spoiler all spoilers.
All right.
It's a Star Trek discussion show. We can't be limited by what's coming, by preventing audiences from knowing what's coming.
Sigourney Weaver's in the new Ghostbusters.
What?
We can spoil anything, right?
Yes, on Starfleet, you can spoil almost anything. I would say let's stick to Star Trek.
Okay.
If it's okay.
William Shatner's in Star Trek Beyond.
Okay, I was wondering about this.
No, I'm kidding.
No,
Come
but
on.
like, there's a case for
I
this.
thought he was going to be, actually.
Geez,
I thought I
guys,
read something a long
come
time ago
on.
that he was going to be in it.
No, he's not in it. He's not.
That would redeem the movie for me.
No.
I haven't even seen it yet.
Okay, let's stick to this movie. You're making your point, Sahel.
In Star Trek V, he goes and he like embraces Spock. I mean, he's very touchy, and I think he's like that in the classic series too. Now that I'm thinking of moments, and Kirk is a very tactile, touchy human, so I don't think it's out of character, and I think it's perfectly fine. And I actually now, again, as I said, like getting older, I can see the virtue of that kind of affection. Showing that kind of affection. There's something really nice about it.
Now that you mentioned Star Trek V, I want to piggyback on those comments. Did any of you read the quotes on the? They're going to come out with a new book on the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, and they had some comments about the making of Star Trek 1. Did any of you happen to come across those comments online?
No, I didn't see that.
Okay, well, apparently some of the comments were no surprise to me. I mean, the story of Star Trek 1 went through a lot of iterations, and apparently Paramount the studio had a lot of problems with Roddenberry. Roddenberry was obviously under a lot of pressure. He apparently was going to have Kirk wrestle Jesus on the bridge of the Enterprise.
Wait, is Star Trek the motion picture or in Star Trek?
Yes. Gene Roddenberry is credited with having written the story for Star Trek the motion picture, and it originally was going to be a little more. It was literal, I mean, here we have V-Ger looking for the creator. Apparently, the crew of the Enterprise was actually going to meet God in the original story treatment, which of course is what eventually happens in Star Trek V.
Wow, so they took the story and they kind of reworked it.
So I'm very interested to know, did Shatner just sort of retain all that, the memory of the original scripts for Star Trek One, and he just decided to, this is my way of honoring Gene by making the Star Trek One that he really wanted. Although obviously, he ran out of money and he couldn't do the Jesus wrestling scene in Star Trek Five, which
Wait,
would have been
sorry.
amazing.
The Jesus wrestling scene was originally written for Star Trek: The Motion Picture,
Right.
And then it was gonna be in.
No, I'm saying that
okay.
obviously he left. I mean, he must have run out of money. I mean,
I'm so
that would have
glad.
been epic to have seen.
I'm so
Kirk
glad
wrestle.
that both times that the opportunity to wrestle Jesus came up didn't happen, because I think it would have just been too much. Captain Kirk versus Jesus.
Excuse me, what does God need with a starship?
I know, that's brilliant. We got to save it for our Star Trek 5 review. So, do you feel like we've exhausted all of the discussion for Star Trek: The Motion Picture? Do you want to go ahead and give it the rating, guys?
Oh,
What does
not
God
done.
need with a starship?
We're not done. What else are we going to talk about?
Sulu, you want to talk about how Sulu was straight in this one?
So, do you think George Takei has a valid argument then, Goldie Scott?
I do, yes. I think Gene's original intention was for Sulu to be very, very straight. I think.
I think that Simon Pegg brings up a really good point. I don't find myself agreeing with Simon Pegg often, but
What was the point?
I think it's up in the air, and also the Kelvin universe can do whatever the fuck it wants.
Personally, I find it more disturbing that Spock is banging Uhura. I mean, that's just me.
Yeah.
That to me, I've never been able to accept.
We have a really good explanation for it on Star Trek Drunk Space Nine, Doctor. If you listen to the most recent episode,
Oh,
yeah,
no,
we
I
actually
haven't listened to
do
the
a
most recent one.
drunk. We actually do a Drunk Space Nine review of the 2009 Kelvin Star Trek, and we actually do talk about how the machinations of the details of what they're.
I don't agree with your ultimate, explanation there, but everybody is
I
allowed
have
to have their own
to
ideas.
listen to this. When was this?
This is this week. It was published this week.
Like 2
Oh my
days
gosh, I have to check this out.
Yeah.
I mean, just because I'll never get another chance to talk about this minutia. Going back to my Star Trek One novelizations, apparently the footage of the Klingon cruisers encountering V-Ger were transmitted to Kirk via mental implants.
What?
Oh.
Yes, there's a footnote that I'm going to read again. Sorry, a lot of footnote reading. At the time of these events, Starfleet Command's sense-seaver implants were still being used. Were still being kept secret. Undoubtedly, the Admiralty was concerned that the public might mistakenly believe them to be some sort of mind control device. Clearly, public respect for Starfleet would have been seriously imperiled by anything reminiscent of the horrors that grew out of the political blah blah blah. Sorry, my English is real bad here. Politicizing of behavior control implants, which led to the bloody mind control revolts of 2043.
Wow.
The horror, Jerry, the horror.
That's really trippy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you remember
I'm
that?
telling you,
So
Gene
you're a
Roddenberry
Seinfeld
was-
person, right?
What's
Doctor,
that?
Are you a Seinfeld person?
Somewhat. No.
Never mind then.
So, I think it, the novelization sounds like it's worth a read. There's a lot of interesting sci-fi in there, and some like interesting bits of Gene Roddenberry's mind.
One more question for all of you.
Mm-hmm.
Is V-Ger a Borg?
Well, I brought this up earlier. There are some fan theories that I've read over the years.
Well, no, this isn't a book. This isn't a book Shatner wrote, The Return.
Oh.
Well, Shatner wrote. You mean The Return of V-Ger?
No, he wrote The Return. He wrote a book where he resurrected himself from Star Trek Generations.
Okay.
It's
What
called.
does that have to do with the Borg, though?
Yeah,
and
tell
V-Ger?
us about that. What was the V-Ger Borg tie-in in that book? Do you know?
Yes, I'm remembering it.
Slowly. You're slowly remembering
Very
it.
slowly. I read the book a long time ago.
Oh, so okay, just a quick. I'm only reading like little blurbs right now. I haven't read this book,
Yeah.
but apparently this book contends that V'Ger may have been responsible for creating the Borg. Is more what it is. Not that he was
Is
creating.
that what it is?
Yeah. So I remember reading somewhere a theory that V'Ger, the
Oh,
being
the Destiny books?
it says was somehow responsible for the creation of the Borg. Is this canonical? Where does the theory come from, and how exactly did it go?
I don't think so. I read the book. There's a trilogy of books that came out a few years ago called, I think it's called Destiny, and it like takes place across kind of all the different generations of Star Trek. And that series is the history of the Borg. It tells you the whole story, and I don't remember V'Ger being a part of that, but
Yeah, and actually, so there is a book that I love called Star Trek Vendetta. Have you guys read that book, right? And so apparently in that book, if I'm not mistaken, the beings that created the ship for V'Ger, so V'Ger, got lost out there and encountered these like machine-like beings. They also created this other. They're known as the Preservers, I think, and they come back and they feature in Star Trek Vendetta. Here's something interesting. It says the Star Trek Encyclopedia speculates that there could be a connection between the Borg and V'Ger, the vessel encountered in Star Trek the Motion Picture. This is advanced in William Shatner's novel The Return. The connection was also suggested in a letter in Starlog issue number 160, November 1990. The letter writer, Christopher Haviland, also speculated that the original Borg drones were members of a race called the Preservers. That's the tie-in to...
Wait, hold on. When was that thing you're reading written?
Probably in the 90s, but listen...
Okay,
anyway.
well, I'm telling you, there's a series of books that clearly explain the origin of the Borg that just came out a few years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
Anyways, according to this, it says, which Spock had suggested in the original
I've read them, though.
episode,
That's what I'm telling you.
the Paradise Syndrome might be responsible for why so many humanoids populate the galaxy. Coincidentally, in the novelization of Star Trek the Motion Picture written by Gene Roddenberry, the V'Ger entity notes that the Ilea probe is resisting the programming given to it because of residual memories and feelings for Decker from its precise replication of the Deltan lieutenant. When V'Ger becomes aware of this, it decides that the resistance was futile, of course. So that's possibly where that phrase comes from, is that novelization that the Doctor was just talking about.
Did we ever see any other Deltans in Star Trek?
Yes, the president of the Federation is a Deltan male in Star Trek 6.
What?
Yeah, the president of the United Federation of Planets in Star Trek 6, I believe he's a Deltan male.
But he looks nothing like Ilea.
Like I said, he's a Deltan male. They look different.
But I mean, like, that's a substantial difference between male and female. Don't you think?
I mean, yeah, but it's not impossible. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
So
Let me just verify this.
So wait a minute. So does
Hey, you guys
everybody
wanna
in
know-
that room?
What's
Did
that?
everybody in that room take a celibacy oath to be there with him?
I think the effect is only from women. I think. Hold on, let's find out. President of the United Federation of Planets. Here we go. Let's see what his name was, and okay. Oh, I didn't know Jonathan Archer was the first or was also a president of the United Federation of Planets. That's fascinating.
Yes.
Let's see here. Okay, so I was wrong.
Hmm.
He's an Efrosian.
Hey, you want to know the Borg, the Borg history?
Sure, let's go over
Okay, the Borg were originally a very advanced race called the Kaliar, and spelled Caeliar. And anyway, they had replaced all their bodies with these particles, and somehow there was a great disaster that their cities got sucked into the distant past, and a bunch of weird stuff happened. Over time, they evolved into the Borg.
Oh wow, it sounds like the
Yeah.
Daleks
The Cybermen.
or the Cybermen. Sorry, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Um,
And stuck got if you watched Enterprise, you know who Erica Hernandez is?
No.
Captain
I've
of the
watched
Columbus
Enterprise,
and Archer's
but I-
girlfriend.
Whoa, there's this cool
oh,
graphic that just appeared for you that wasn't there before, Galdo Scott.
I didn't
Oh,
see
really?
that.
Say something.
I'm saying something.
Whoa,
and the
it's
graphic
the
is appearing.
it's the symbol of the Obsidian Order, and it's like vibrating
Oh my
as you
goodness.
speak. It's
You
so
haven't
cool.
seen that at all?
Goodness.
I've been seeing that all this time. You just saw that now?
That's the first time I've seen it.
Weird.
It was a
He
blank
hasn't been
screen.
looking at his screen.
No, I have been. It was a blank screen.
Would any of you have liked to have seen more movies, more Star Trek movies?
No.
Just no, none at all.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Stop
I didn't know
Star
there was a
Trek
second
at
part
this
to
point.
that.
Would any of you like to have seen more Star Trek films sort of in this context, meaning the same uniforms, the same Enterprise? Well, obviously, Eileen and Decker are gone, so I don't. I guess the same crew. That weird guy with the forehead. The guy who was on the bridge and said, "Oh crap, what about Decker? He's been with the ship since the beginning."
Isn't that Eric Roth? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, that was a really bad joke. That was so.
That was a really,
That
really.
was really
You
bad.
meant to say Eric Stoltz,
I
by the way.
I meant to say Eric Stoltz.
Eric Broth?
Eric Roth.
I
said
knew the bad joke you were trying to make.
I was combining Tim Roth and Eric Stoltz. Just 'cause
I know what bad joke you were trying to make. That's how bad this is.
Sorry, so bad. I apologize. That
Where
was
is
really-
Cher now? That's what I want to know.
Where is Cher now?
Why was she not in Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
I really love the look of this film. I thought it was interesting, but I have to say that if it were not for Star Trek 2, no, I was very happy to abandon the entire aesthetic of Star Trek: The Motion Picture in favor of the aesthetic of Star Trek 2.
Is that what you're talking about? The aesthetic or the type of?
Yes. The aesthetic. The production design, the costumes, the transporter. The transporter is very different. The transporter.
Yeah, no, I would
effect.
have liked to have seen more of this. I'm down with this.
No,
McCoy with the open chest and the medallion, everything.
Yeah.
The transporter in Star Trek 2 is so cool. It sounds like you're being dematerialized. It's like.
Yeah, but this one's like a tube. It's like.
But his question wasn't. I thought your question was just, would you have liked to have seen more movies in this? And my answer is yes. I don't think we're talking about replacing Star Trek 2 with this, are we?
No.
You don't
Well,
have to pick one or the other.
If we saw more movies like this, Star Trek 2 would have been in this aesthetic, and I just don't think it would have worked. I think this, like...
Yeah, and then they would have gone to that aesthetic in like Star Trek 4.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I still would not. To me, the
We're
quintessential...
talking about an imaginary universe where
I
more
realize
movies
that,
are
and I'm
being-
saying that for me, the
The
quintessential...
Kelvin 2 universe, let's call it.
For me, there is an argument
The V-Ger
that can be
universe.
made.
And why not? Because we got 5 movies in those red uniforms and 1 in this. Why couldn't it have been 2 and 4?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that like I thought the uniforms were cool and interesting, but I just feel like when we get the red tunics with the the sash or whatever, I just feel like that's like the quintessential look for cinematic Star Trek. To me, I just can't. I like it. I like the look of Star Trek: The Motion Picture in its context. I think it's a great transition look from the original series to what we later see in Star Trek Two. But I think that like you know, yeah, I mean, I think it would have been smoother if they did it over time. It is such a dramatic difference. I mean, in Star Trek Two, everything's different. Everything's just different. But they do keep a lot of things like the red alert sound stays consistent. I love the red alert. You know, dan 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 dan. I like all the computer interactions that are in this movie. I think there's a lot of interesting computer voices throughout the movie. We don't have, Majel. Well, she's playing Dr. Chapel, but we don't have her doing the voice of the computer. It's a bunch of kind of computer sounding male voices. Now, I do like a lot of things about it, but I do think that the superior aesthetic is Star Trek 2, and I wouldn't be in favor of seeing more movies in this aesthetic. A TV show, maybe.
You know, the newspaper strips. I've never shown this. This is the Star Trek newspaper strips, which were released after the film. They are in the Star Trek 1 aesthetic. And that's why I asked the question, because I actually think it's quite interesting. The Klingons are definitely, they're a little bit different in Star Trek 1.
Well, I think this was very different because this is the first time we see ridges appear on the Klingon. I mean, the current design of the Klingons is very different from the original series design of the Klingons.
Right.
People weren't expecting that. By the way, gorgeous special effects in the beginning. The one shot of the lead Klingon vessel where kind of like the camera pans overhead and then it does this kind of 360-degree turn and then it the angle corrects back to showing the vessel going off and so on and so forth.
Also, one aesthetic that continues from Star Trek 1 is, of course, the engineering uniforms. The engineering uniforms continue from into Star Trek 2 and 3, the same ones, right?
I think they're very, if they're not the same, they're very similar because I did see some of the engineering staff were wearing space helmets, which was interesting in this movie. The warp core, we have to talk about that. This is the first time we see the standard model for the warp core moving forward. I think prior to this, and I like that Enterprise actually went back to this kind of different look and didn't try to retcon, this style of warp engine.
You mean Enterprise the show?
Yeah, I like that Enterprise the show didn't retcon the current design into pre-existing Star Trek, but this is the first time you see the warp core looking this way, and then this is a design that stays with us all the way through the next generation.
Interesting note, apparently in the newspaper strips, Lieutenant Ilia survives.
How?
There's no explanation. I don't think the people who wrote the newspaper strip knew the ending of the movie.
At the time.
So you actually see Lieutenant Ilia. I don't know if you can... Oh, actually, she's on the cover right here. Hold on. There she is. Lieutenant Ilia is a continuing part of the crew in the Star Trek newspaper strips, which ran from 79 to 81. So for all those who appreciate the aesthetic of the look and the designs that were seen in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, I highly recommend you get Volume 1 of IDW's Star Trek: The Newspaper Comics.
Very cool.
Are they in color?
Well, yeah, actually, the way they ran the strips is that on Sunday they had a full page of Star Trek comics, and like it would take up the full page, I guess, of the newspaper, and those were in color. So when they reprinted them, those pages are in color, and that's the Sunday comic. But then the rest of the week they were just one strip, and they were in black and white.
Hmm.
Oh.
Yeah. Did any of you remember reading the Star Trek
I
comics in the
do.
newspaper?
I read
No.
Star Trek comics, but not in the newspaper. I read them in comic book form.
But you never read like the strip in the newspaper, like on.
I
No?
knew of its existence. I just don't recall reading it.
Okay. I'm done with Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I don't know about you guys.
I think I feel like this was a pretty complete discussion. I think I'm ready to hear what everyone gives it on a scale of 1 to 10. We'll start with Goldu Scott since we know his is going to be probably the lowest.
5.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It went up a little. Doctor?
It's not terrible. I mean, it's super boring. But the time that I got through the whole thing, I remember that it was good.
I do want to share a personal memory. When I was a kid, I tried to watch Star Trek: The Motion Picture a lot of times, and it took like a few viewings to watch it all the way through because I would kind of doze off and lose my attention span. But as an adult, I don't have that same problem, and I love this movie. I would have given it a different rating as a kid or as a teenager than I'm going to give it today.
And what is your rating today?
My rating today for
Very
Star Trek: The
dramatic.
Motion Picture is 9.5.
Ooh,
9.5. I can't give it a
Low for
10
you.
because there's only a few Star Trek movies, and there's one movie that I want to give a 10 to.
Wait, I'm sorry. Hold on. Did you just say an 8.5?
I said 9.
You said a 9.5 for Star Trek: The Motion Picture,
I did. I gave it a 9.
and this is on a scale of 1 to 10.
That is correct.
I just can't. I can't understand this.
Well, what's your rating, Doctor?
Golden Scott is right. It's a 5. It's clearly a 5.
man.
Thank you. Yes.
5.
I love
Look.
it.
Let me just break it. Okay, Star Trek Erection is 0. If Star Trek Erection is 0, then this is clearly 5.
Erection.
So, and Star Trek 2 would be a 10. So I don't understand where you go. I don't understand where the 9.5. Where do you put Star Trek 4? Where do you put Star Trek 3?
I'm gonna have to watch them all over again because I'm revising my ratings, but I feel like this is strong.
Don't wait for the translation. You know. Star Trek 3. Where do you put Star Trek 3 if Star Trek 1 is a 9.5?
I think Star Trek 3 for
is a
me
better
might be.
movie.
I'm just guessing right now. I have to see it again, but I'm gonna guess it's Star Trek.
6?
Star Trek 3 is probably a 9 or an 8. 8 or a 9. I'm not sure yet. I have to rewatch it.
See, Doctor, what you need to know is that Sohail's scale begins at 7.5.
We were kind of discussing this earlier. I mean, unfortunately, being Starfleet boy, there's certain things that come with it, and unfortunately, I just love Star Trek. I don't know. It's just too hard to give it a low rating to begin with.
There's love, and then there's just
Too much
blinded by I mean,
Yeah.
What's the Vulcan word that you came up with for lover? Star Trek is my
sorry,
Sola, my Sola,
Kalar or something.
Kalar, Colonaire.
Colonoscopar.
Well, so that brings like what I guess the average rating of this film to like a 7.
No, an average is 5. What? Oh my! I don't know.
Yeah, because I threw you off.
9.5.
What's the
That's
average?
19.5 divided by 3. That's 6.5.
6.5. I was
Average
close.
of 6.5.
So the average rating for this movie between the three of us is 6.5. So I want to look at
I'm
your
very upset.
You're disappointed. It's more like
I'm
a
upset too.
disappointment. I'm sorry, guys. I just really loved it. And on that note, I want to sign off by saying that I especially felt like something I didn't really notice or think about much before, but the end of the movie says the human adventure is just beginning. So I think that was very cool, and it kind of puts Star Trek and space travel and the whole point of Star Trek into a nicely distilled phrase. So the human adventure is just beginning, and live long and prosper, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our Starfleet Boy discussion about Star Trek the Motion Picture, and we'd love to hear what you thought.